Folks, thank you for tuning in to this special DeadlineLive.info edition of our program. No, it's not the actual show, but we wanted to give you these special news reports with some of our favorite people. And on the line with us now, taking part in this DeadlineLive.info special report, is the one and only Debra Medina. Of course, you remember Debra ran against the two Bilderberg candidates here in Texas for governor. She just about beat them, and I think she scared the establishment so much that they really focused on her. She is the real Save the Republic candidate. She has a great new organization called We Texans, which we're going to tell you all about. But let's welcome to the air Debra Medina. Debra, thank you for joining me today.
Great to be with everybody, Jack.
Well, I tell you, I really miss those kind of halcyon days of where we were running against Kay Bailey and Rick Perry. You did such a fantastic job there, and boy, do we sure need you in Texas now. So your new organization, We Texans, we're going to talk about here in a minute, but just looking at the political climate, both nationally and here in Texas, what are your immediate observations?
We're still fighting that same fight, aren't we, on every front. The very ideas that we talked about during the governor's campaign or primary campaign season here in Texas are coming more and more obvious every day. Texas in particular facing a huge debt and deficit going into the next cycle. That's beginning to get more press. The open border problems that we have beginning to get more press. The intrusion of the EPA in our state beginning to get more press. It just everywhere you look. The president taking over more and more, nationalizing everything. All of those issues that we talked about becoming more kind of front burner, forefront of our mind issues. So we need everybody now more than ever to step up, stay engaged, to continue the battle, and that's what we're doing with the We Texans organization.
Debra, do you get the feeling that people have fallen into the whole change paradigm? In other words, are we getting set up for kind of a realignment in the same fashion of which Obama promised us, but now from the other side?
Well, I think we missed some real opportunity back in March. If we were going to begin to return our government to the guiding principles that conservatives believed in, you had to make those changes in March. And by and large, in Texas and by and large across the country, people, despite the fact that congressional approval ratings are, lower than they've ever been, despite the fact that you've had a year and a half of Tea Party activism, despite the fact that it seems like everybody's politically aware of what's going on, they march into the voting booth and vote for the same candidate. They vote to re-elect their incumbent, and that's going to give us more of the same. So I don't really expect to see much change after November. I think the Democrats are going to stay in control. I think President Obama is going to continue to do what he's been doing. I think if the Republicans get in, we haven't seen Republicans leading like conservatives. We've seen more big government. So Democrat big government, Republican big government, all big government. If we're going to make changes, we've got to do it in the primary process, which means we've got a lot of work to do in Texas. We're going to see redistricting come in this session. We didn't get we got some change in the primary, but very little. I think there's a lot of focus right now on the Texas House races. Those are very critical, but at the end of the day, November 3rd, 4th, whatever the day after the election is, it's pretty clear to me, even from here, that unless we can mount a very vocal, consistent, persistent, grassroots voice that holds conservative legislators, purportedly conservative legislators, feet to the fire, they are going to give us more big government intervention. Just look at what all the committees are doing now as they're taking testimony in the interim. Every goal and objective they have is how can we control more of your life. Unless grassroots activists are at those hearings, unless we are calling those legislators every day and reminding them what the proper role of government is going to be, we're going to continue to get more of the same, which is more big government intrusion and intervention.
You say hold their feet to the fire, because we do need to hold every elective official or representative, a public servant as I like to call them, we have to hold them accountable. And I really supported you in your run, but when you were going to be elected, I still would have held your feet to the fire. Though when we're talking about Rick Perry, we're not actually talking about feet. I think we're talking more about hooves. Hold their hooves to the fire, Deborah. The other thing is, you look at the atmosphere. And I was just watching a press conference with Gibbs, the official spokesperson for the White House, and a lot of the questions, again, had to do with racism. This is getting really out of hand on both sides, and I'm sure you're aware the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, Monsanto, of course, has let go one of his employees, Shirley Sherrod, for some type of a racist statement, which we now know might have been somewhat manipulated in the press. This isn't letting up on both sides. I've never seen a time when our country is more divided, not just on politics, not just on our personal beliefs, but also on race. Do you have a comment on that? Because you have a multicultural family, and I wonder if that played into, in a way, why they wanted to make you disappear, because you are almost immune to this. If you could comment, please, on the just contentious atmosphere this summer before this midterm election.
Well, I think that, we heard in a recent presidential campaign a reminder that we get our rights as individuals from our Creator, not based on our belonging to one certain group or another. And until we as a society can get back and remember that, and yet we applaud that idea, that's right. I am gifted with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness from my Creator. It's not because I'm female or Hispanic or, green-eyed or anything else. It's because I'm created as a unique, wonderful being, and that's where I get those rights from. And yet at the same time, we see in all of our public policy this divisiveness into groups and this association into groups. And working together in groups is wonderful, but that's not where your rights come from. We've been pushed to forget that as a society, and you're absolutely correct. We are more divisive. This misguided notion that we have tolerance has really created a society that's very intolerant, and so we don't allow people to express their views, and if their view is in any way controversial, then you see them run out on a rail. That's a dangerous place for us to be as a nation, because what may be very acceptable today may be very unacceptable by those in power 3 or 4 years from now, and you find yourself being marched off to a gulag.
Scott Brown, you were speaking earlier about, kind of voting for the same people over and over again, and while we were all happy to see a conservative allegedly take the Ted Kennedy seat, it certainly was payback and entertaining. The proof has to be in the pudding. And I don't know if you know, but he had voted now again for another measure, another bill put out by the progressives and the Democrats at the Obama administration.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of people here in Texas, even during my campaign or the primary campaign, saying, whoa, wait a minute. Debra Medina is no Scott Brown. So wake up. There were some pretty good indicators. He's no Ted Kennedy either, but he's far from a conservative in the mold of the Thomas Jeffersons and I guess constitutional conservatives. Scott Brown's not one, and that's becoming. If it wasn't clear before, it should have been, but it's becoming pretty clear now.
Well, and the Financial Regulatory Reform Bill, or Financial Perestroika, as I like to call it, because as we know, perestroika just certainly does mean reform. It's come here to this country. That's my own personal observation.